If you are joining our story with this video at chapter 7, I encourage you to start at the beginning at chapter 1, the first chapter in a series of videos charting the frustrating journey of two people discovering the only significant Provenance Knights Templar artifact so far found in the world, and the appalling scandal of the Scottish heritage establishment negligently turning a blind eye to the truth, all to preserve a lie. The video for chapter 1 is given in the link to the description below. In the last video, we revealed the blatant intellectual corruption and bigotry presented against our research from one of the world's recognised leading Templar historians and a curator from National Museum Scotland, a reported specialist in heraldry, medieval epigraphy and metalwork. The two academics join a universal complicity of academic historians fostering intentional intellectual debasement, rejecting any competent and merited challenge against accepted academic understanding. Discrimination, commonly referred to as academic snobbery, or better described as intellectual bigotry, the unashamed prejudice applied against anyone outside the preferred academic class, the unreasonable intolerance of one group against any outside their society, regardless of the merit they bring, all because they are perceived to be intellectually inferior. Bigotry, a vile, prevalent human characteristic with no place in any intelligent, mutually beneficial civilized society, yet promoted by our educators through their poor example and poor behaviour. Instead of receiving support, protection and consideration of this an extraordinary discovery supported by undisputed evidence we discussed in chapter 4, we are instead having to fight to have one of the most significant medieval discoveries made this millennia recognised for the good of Scotland and the Scottish legend. Not because we are challenged with rational alternative opinion, but because we dare to put accomplishment in front of those that are supposed to lead the way, but fail truth and merit almost every time. We are now currently threatened with fines and imprisonment by the establishment because we dared to present merit where patently incompetent understanding had been allowed to be fossilised by the academic and bureaucratic establishment, building decision-making knowingly on a lie. In the next few videos, we look at a key player in our story, the Scottish government-sponsored agency Historic Environment Scotland, declaring itself as the lead public body established to investigate, care for and promote Scotland's historic environment. In this video, we expose the agency's refusal to recognise or even support the potential of one of the most significant medieval discoveries made in Scotland, because although it recognises the merit in the evidence we present, it refuses to recognise the merit in the finders. In subsequent videos, we look at the consequence of the Historic Environment Scotland's prejudiced refusal to prudently engage with the remarkable history of Holywood. With its patent manipulation of the site's historic property record, deliberately misrepresenting the site's special interest, which in turn presents catastrophic issues for the heritage in our care and the world's only Provenance Knights Templar artifact, further contributing to the agency's wholesale catastrophic failure and scandal is recently reported in the press. A failure fostered by an indifferent Scottish government and Scotland's heritage sector, indifferent to pre-existing and serious shortcomings in the heritage sector, decades old. In 2021, with the first version of our archaeological report completed on the history and provenance of the two bells in Holywood Church, my wife and I sought to alert the Scottish authorities about the discovery. Identifying the first Knights Templar family of Scotland, restoring the Knights Templar history of Holywood, and presenting priceless and unique Templar artifacts in archaeology was a very big deal. Not a mere interesting variation of the history of the bells in the Holywood site, but a fundamental redefinition of it. An extraordinary medieval discovery not only of national interest, but of world interest. A redefinition which would significantly recondition any conservation works we as owners undertook and how the public would view and understand the site in the future. In the spring of 2021, with a report praised by our early beta readers, we contacted the British Museum, National Museum Scotland and several archaeological leads both within universities and professional agencies for advice regarding appraisal and treatment of our find. We were referred to both the local council and Historic Environment Scotland. The British Museum, amongst others, confirming the Scottish Government-sponsored heritage agency, Historic Environment Scotland, had the resources and published remit to help us investigate, promote and help us care for the discovery. Indeed, the agency was established in 2015 to investigate, care for and promote Scotland's historic environment, its history in its buildings and in its heritage landscapes. The agency was deemed by others in the heritage sector the ideal agency to assist with our Knights Templar discovery for the benefit of Scottish heritage and public interest. On first contact, technical officers at Historic Environment Scotland showed great interest in our research, particularly as they confirmed there was very little known about the Holywood site. They agreed to visit the site to evaluate the discovery, receive our report and, if deemed appropriate, help us with the find. Their intention was made explicit before they visited the site, as was our claim that we had discovered the two bells recorded as 16th century on the historic building record of Holywood, held by Historic Environment Scotland, were in fact two 12th century Knights Templar bells. Two staff from Historic Environment Scotland visited Holywood in June 2021. They inspected the bells and listened to a brief summary of our findings, promising to take our report away and evaluate the evidence. However, the agency's promised evaluation of our report and discovery never materialised. There was no feedback and no follow-up. Rather than offer support or give advice, Historic Environment Scotland, as we would later find like many other history-based institutions following receipt of our report, shrank away from its consideration, as if we presented an issue that was completely indigestible to the agency. So indigestible, the agency has expended 5 years of bureaucratic energy to avoid any further engagement with our extraordinary discovery, neither disagreeing nor agreeing with the find. If our investigation had no merit, they could have told us. If our conclusion was spurious, they could have expressed that view. If we needed to clarify issues, they could have asked for our clarification. The report was not a difficult read. It was comprehensive, referenced, and accessible to any reader with a broad understanding of medieval history. The agency had all the technical expertise in-house to challenge and review our archaeological report, as confirmed by the Scottish Government Department and its Minister sponsoring Historic Environment Scotland. In 2021, my wife and I could not understand what was so troubling about our discovery that we should be blanked so obviously by the agency, especially considering the huge benefit the discovery would bring not only to us, the finders and owners of Holywood Church, but to the local community, to Scotland's historical reputation and Scotland's tax and tourist revenue. Our repeated requests for feedback on the agency's evaluation of the discovery fell on deaf ears, so we had to ask our local member of the Scottish Parliament to intervene, while offering a further petition to Historic Environment Scotland, pleading for their help, which they eventually acted on, responding under its own complaint procedure, telling us why they would not engage with our research. My wife and I, and our advocacy at the time, wondered why the agency had agreed to evaluate our find or visit the site in the first place if they had no intention of engaging with the discovery due to its regulatory framework. The agency's reasoning that it was not in the agency's remit to consider the discovery was a contradiction to everything others in the heritage sector understood. The agency's response even contradicted the agency's very own published mandate. Whereas it was accepted the agency had no legal duty placed upon it to investigate every historical inquiry, the inescapable fact was Digger and I had not presented a small matter, offered within a superficially derived opinion, to be so easily dismissed because the agency did not legally have to consider it. The discovery and the reappraisal of the site's history were significant and extremely far-reaching. But even so, the agency had already declared its interest and intention to engage with our discovery by visiting the site. At no point did the agency offer any useful guidance on how we may circumvent the agency's constraints under their declared formal function. To further a discovery they did not refute, or how we may seek authentication. This appeared both bizarre and particularly unhelpful. The agency did suggest we start with the local museum, but considering the agency knew we'd already approached the local museum and National Museum Scotland, the suggestion was hollow, unhelpful, and rather condescending. The agency had certainly evaluated our report because they took detail from it, and from that detail later amended the historic property listing on Holywood on the strength of the report's dismantlement of the existing record of the bells being 16th century. We will discuss the agency's manipulation of the historic property record of Holywood in the next video. The agency had also evaluated the academic's counter-opinion to our discovery, acknowledging the conflict but staying clear of any appraisal of that conflict or the obvious intellectual corruption and bias exhibited by the two academics, and in particular the curator from National Museum Scotland. We accused Historic Environment Scotland of showing the same intellectual bigotry we'd experienced from the two critiquing academics. That the agency had refused to consider our investigation or take it seriously because my wife and I were outside academia and the academic-led establishment. But the agency lied. They were indeed prejudiced, because what they reported to us in 2024 was a very different story presented to the Scottish Government in 2026. The agency confirmed to the Scottish Minister in charge of Culture, and through him to our local member of the Scottish Parliament, that the reappraisal of the historical understanding of the site was purely an academic matter. Inferring that our investigation, although it included a great deal of academic research, academic contribution, understanding and academic review, was in the agency's view worthless with regards to understanding the site's special interest. The response to our Scottish Member of Parliament was a follow-up on the agency's refusal to answer a straightforward question. That what, based on the evidence given in Chapter 4 of this video, was so problematic about our extraordinary discovery that the agency would neither support the discovery nor take steps to amend the special interest of the site to indeed reflect the Holywood site's extraordinary special Knights Templar interest. The agency did not answer the question and instead attempted to pull the wool over the Scottish Government and our Member of Parliament's eyes by inferring that confirmation of the bells and site's historical understanding was an activity requiring considerable cost and resource outside the capacity of the agency, despite the fact the agency had already evaluated our report, underwritten by two competent professional analysts, backed by evidence, scholarly contribution and inarguable fact. Circumstance the agency had already confirmed by its actions, with a whistleblower testifying that the agency, not able to refute the researchers' conclusions, chose to ignore it instead. The agency implied there were different opinions, debate and argument over the bells and site's provenance, that even with academic research and peer review, there was likely to be no conclusion over the bells' dating or their provenance. But there was no debate, no evidence arguments from the academic referred specialists reviewing our research, and only one supportable historical opinion, verified as fact by our research, which was the opinion expressed in the highly regarded 18th and 19th century statistical accounts of Scotland, and on record in the local museum, and is testified by the pre-1300 form of one of the bells. Testimony that declared both bells were of 12th century manufacture, taken from a former monastic house in 1779 and put into a new church on the same site. A monastic house that was recognised in the 18th and early 19th century as a 12th century Templar presbytery. There was no supportable counter-argument or counter-evidence against that view, only demonstrable, unsupportable, biased opinion, and with no supportable argument, there is no debate. The result of the agency's smokescreening was the Scottish Government declared the bells of Holywood not of public interest nor of national importance. The Scottish Government unwisely accepting the agency's testimony on trust, despite the agency's evidenced catastrophic incompetence and deceit, with the agency's scandalous behaviour already exposed across a wide range of its activities in recent press and audit reports. Initial scepticism from the agency was expected. After all, Templar history is overwhelmed with speculation. This speculative fervour to write Templar history as the author prefers it, rather than as the evidence presented, was a problem we were fully aware of, and a topic for another video. But the Templar history was always there at Holywood, hidden by over 100 years of local mismanagement of the site's historical record. But considering the tremendous potential benefits to us, the church's sustainability, the local and national economy, and a new understanding and appreciation of Scottish medieval history, any reasonable person would expect even the potential of the discovery was something not to dismiss without prudent consideration. There was never any indication given to us the agency would not be able to assist us in our discovery before they received our report and visited the site. So we suspect Historic Environment Scotland's change in attitude had nothing to do with regulatory or resource constraints, or anything to do with its doubt over the discovery's authenticity. Instead, the agency, imbued with the same malevolent intellectual prejudice infecting the heritage sector as a whole, through its academically ill-tuned managers, faced with an uncomfortable presentation from us demonstrating merit and evidence rarely seen in historical research and understanding, exposing the weakness of the historical record created by superficial and lazy academic opinion rather than scholarly research, and unable to debunk our investigation or our discovery, the agency employed deceit to avoid its further involvement, deliberately denied Scotland its history for no other reason than the preservation of harmful intellectual bigotry. This was inexcusable. Another graphic illustration of how deviant those in the history sector have been allowed to become, exhibiting a truancy of integrity, professionality, or any real benefit to the true understanding of history. It was the agency's willful exclusion of the public in a genuine understanding of history, and as we will see, the deliberate detriment of heritage sustainability, the antithesis of everything the agency and the heritage policy of Scotland guiding the agency was set up to deliver. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Engage with us in the comments and through registration on our website. Sign the petition. Help us fund our campaign to have the history of the site here at Holywood recognised. Help us as two of the many who have to deal with the malevolent and incompetent decision making by both local and national government. Legal action is our only recourse, and it is very expensive. So we are seeking support, investors in the discovery and our campaign. Please help by buying me a coffee in the link below, or by buying our book through the link on our website. And I'll see you next time.